Hi everyone, Bruce Dickson here. Welcome to the first presentation of Holistic Psychology 2.0. I hope it will be useful and support what you are doing in holistic health, self-healing, and practicing energy medicine methods with clients. This only comes alive in support of more effective self-healing, and if you work with clients, making practitioners more stable, credible, and profitable. I co-founded the LA Holistic Chamber of Commerce with Camille Leon, and this is an outgrowth of that kind of activity. HP 2.0 is not about me, not about what you can buy from me. I'm addressing holistic healers and the 27,000 participants of Energy Medicine Exchange on Facebook because we, and people like us, are the likely center of new sustainable culture. 2.0 celebrates sustainable, holistic, environmental culture as the new cultural center. It's going to replace late-phase corporate capitalism sooner or later. This seems inevitable, so we may as well get our act together. The big things 2.0 contributes is an expanded reframe of Humanistic Psychology 1.0. Second, a reframe of experimental method in the holistic field. If you know your history, you know beginning in the 1800s, science defined first medicine, then psychology. Now the roles are reversing. Since 2014, it's been possible for humanistic psychology and holistic health to redefine science. So some exciting progress is afoot. Holistic Psychology 2.0 comes alive only as it's useful to you for what you're doing, so you can do more of it, be more effective, and, of course, support your family. So we have 6 principles, and maybe you'll think of some more, and we're going to go into them after this little introduction. For several centuries, corporate capitalist culture did meet the needs of a majority of people, perhaps as late as the 1950s. In 2011, Occupy Wall Street and others observed and intuited that mainstream corporate capitalist culture was no longer meeting the needs of a majority of people. Parallel to the decline of corporate capitalist culture, many of you will know, on the outskirts and fringes of the mainstream since the 1950s, alternative holistic culture has been gaining momentum. Now, there is a guy who studies this, and his name is Carroll Quigley. He was one of Bill Clinton's teachers at Georgetown. He's an American historian and theorist on the evolution of civilizations. In the history of civilizations, according to Quigley, when mainstream cultures no longer meet the needs of the majority, consensus starts to shift. A suction is created at the now empty center of the dying mainstream culture. For example, towards the end of the Roman Empire, Christianity, which had been on the fringes, but was more progressive than the slave culture of Rome, was sucked right into the center of the mainstream, making the Holy Roman Empire. And it may be now that 2015 is when peripheral holistic developments, gathering steam for 30, 40, 50 years now, cohere into a credible holistic psychology and flow into the center to become a new center of cultural consensus. The following 6 principles of holistic psychology can be viewed as pulling together what's been building on the fringes outside of corporate capitalist culture for the last 50, 60 years. Principle number 1, establish a stable, reliable, theoretical, and experimental foundation for self-healing and energy medicine. It will be done through the touchstone of Goethean science, which can be reframed and expanded into Goethean holistic science. It's easier to do than you might imagine, but it's complex enough that it has its own video and own audio. Principle number 2, establish a science more balanced between cold thinking and warm thinking. For the last 150 years, we've had a science, and more than just science, based on only cold thinking. In Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy, this is not a bad thing. This was a natural development. There's a polarity between the warm pole and the cold pole. The warm pole is metabolic and blood forces, the forces of birth. These are more unconscious forces, but they're also characterized by warmth and rest and relaxation and nourishment. At the other pole is the intellect, which are cold forces of precision and rigor and evaluation and right versus wrong and good versus bad. And for the last 150 years, we've had a science overwhelmingly predominated by only cold thinking. This was not a problem originally, as it was inevitable that this had to develop, but in that it has predominated and taken over everything, banking, economy, education, that's way out of balance. And since the 1950s, there have been more and more people, and more each decade, who have said, we want a more balanced science, balance between warm thinking and cold thinking. And again, this is going to come through the touchstone of Goethean science in another audio, which will be more clear. What's crucial here is that experimental method is a part of holistic psychology, must be a part of self-healing, must be a part of energy medicine. This is how we go forward and refine things to end up with best practices that are then teachable and trainable. So that was number 2. Number 3, use fun, interactive, hands-on social learning methods wherever and whenever possible. Some of you will know in elementary schools now, K through 12 schools now, high-stakes testing is the big interest. This is not because it's good for kids. This is because it has to do with politicians. Politicians get elected or get booted out of office based on whether kids' test scores go up or down. However, for parents and for kids, the high-stakes testing is pretty useless in many regards, and it's an excellent example of only cold thinking. So what replaces high-stakes testing? And what replaces a college bachelor's degree when it becomes no more valuable for getting a job than a high school diploma? Well, what replaces it is fun, social, group learning. Unless you're going into the sciences, where there's still lots of jobs. A lot of learning is going to shift towards fun, interactive, social group process, because people learn better with each other and when they're having fun together and when they can support each other and where they can learn from each other. Now, the Waldorf methods people have 80, 90 years of practice in this, so they're ahead of most people in this. For those of you who haven't heard of the Waldorf methods, what you might know of, alternatively, is the social group learning, group process. It's active in some churches and in the seminars that go Thursday, Friday night, and all day Saturday, Sunday. The premier among them is the Insight Seminar's Awakening Heart Seminar, which is an outstanding example of a heartfelt approach to group learning, group process, group learning, social learning. So what happens? Experiences, group processes, are artfully designed to invite individuals to participate in their own learning, growth, and advancement. In a too warm educational environment, we would just pass everybody. You showed up, you came to class today, you get an A. That's too warm. That's too permissive. The too cold would be only those people who get an A can leave today, everyone else has to stay and take the retest. That's too cold. And in the middle is fun, social group learning processes involving and acknowledging multiple intelligences, which will happen more and more face-to-face, less and less online, though we're going to go through a period here, at least through 2016, where it's more and more online. But then it will flip over and become more bricks and mortar, is my belief. And we'll be learning more and more in intentional communities, where we'll be organized around learning in fun social group learning process. Principle 4, incorporate the existing knowledge base about our etheric body as it pertains to wellness and holistic healing. Holistic psychology aims to bridge the gap between 45 years of successful energy medicine sessions and the absence of a coherent modern theory about the etheric body. Incorporating a coherent modern knowledge base for the etheric body fills much of this gap. Now, what's been stopping us? What's been stopping us is that the first time this was done, it was done in only metaphysical terms, which were somewhat wide-ranging and somewhat cult-oriented and somewhat narrow and specific and weren't very accessible to people. And it became highly technical in a way that most people did not appreciate. The other thing that happened is that there was still a lot of fear about talking about invisible things in the sense that they might become a religion and a dogma. In 2015, now that we've had 30 years of ecumenical spirituality, we understand what I believe about my own divinity doesn't have to be what you believe about it, and we can still have common ground about how we worship, even if we worship in different ways. And we can all use time in solitude together to practice our own methods of meditation, etc. So we've kind of solved that problem so that you can talk about phenomena in the etheric body now without pretending to be a church or pretending to be a kooky metaphysical person. So because you cannot understand muscle testing and you cannot understand the quick release therapies unless you have a modern, coherent model of the etheric body and how it works. In concert with the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, holistic psychology distinguishes between veritable energy, which can be measured, and putative energy, which has yet to be measured. High on the agenda of holistic psychology is showing how invisible energies, which can't be measured by machines, can be measured by human beings. One thing Rogers and Maslow and humanistic psychology were unequipped to explain, assimilate, or work with was 50 years of successful experiments in the American Society of Dowsers and 80 years of success in the British Society of Dowsers, two groups famous for their laudable ethical standards. Two simple conclusions can be drawn from this huge body of experimental evidence, trial, and error. One, the human being is the most sensitive measuring instrument for purposes of daily living, lifestyle choices, and decision making. Two, 20 or more methods of dowsing exist, including muscle testing of all kinds. This piece never got chewed on, nor digested, nor assimilated in Humanistic Psychology 1.0. As well, dowsing did not become altogether safe until the ecumenical spirituality piece came online in the 1990s. The omission of dowsing from humanistic psychology is another reason an expanded 2.0 is needed now. Principle 5. Take up the work left undone from the first attempts at psychosomatic medicine, 1955 to 1965. It's a shame the really promising movement of psychosomatic medicine was unable to blossom. After 1965, all the research dollars went into pharmaceuticals, and that whole impulse went underground until 1970, when it reemerged as holistic health and holistic healing, but then still did not develop a literature till 2006 with Messages from the Body by Michael Lincoln. There is similar literature as well now. There's enough literature now that anybody who wants to, who has a physical symptom, can look it up in a book and see guesses about what the mental emotional disturbances are that could be causative for the physical symptom. With muscle testing, you can test through these guesses. You can make a lot of headway on self-healing with these very simple tools. So we want to make those tools more accessible and more available. Principle 6. Provide psychological support and encouragement for balancing the three spheres of society. A major knowledge base for success at inner cooperation and whole-brainedness. Holistic psychology also provides support and encouragement for the balancing of outer society, the outer game, the threefolding of society. You can see an article on the threefold society at Wikipedia. Monitoring and a theoretical foundation for regulating the three spheres is the only solution to avoid domination by one of the three spheres over the other two. In threefold terms, in 2014, we continued to suffer from corporate capitalist economic interests controlling and strangling all other activity. That's got to end, and it doesn't look like science is going to do it. Corporate capitalists certainly aren't going to do it. So it looks like the psychologists will have to start that discussion and make that a public conversation. The principles of holistic psychology articulated above are probably going to have their most accessible form in social learning group processes. And I sure hope that's the case. But until we arrange those, we have this nice slideshow to work with. And I hope you'll join me for the next audio. I hope if holistic psychology is useful to you or useful to your friends, that you'll share this presentation as widely as possible, and let's work on this together.